Welcome to Dear Romance Writer, where three writers who always deliver happily ever afters offer questionable advice for your relationship, work, and life problems. I'm Roan Parrish.
And I'm Xio Axelrod. Avery is on the road this week, but we have a great show for you. Joining us is the fabulous Tessa Bailey. Yay! Welcome, Tessa.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm excited to listen to these questions and give some advice. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, the one person in the world who doesn't know who you are and hasn't read your books.
There has to be at least a few. No, I am a contemporary romance author. I mostly write romantic comedies, I would say, these days. My most recent book was My Killer Vacation. Before that, I had this Bellinger Sisters series with Hook, Line, and Sinker. I'm looking over in your background. I'm like, what was the name of my book again? Hook, Line, and Sinker.
It's the only book of yours I have in print.
And I live on Long Island. I have a daughter and a husband and a cat. And this is where I spend all my time, in this very office. Never leave.
Well, we're really happy to have you here. Thanks for hanging out with us today. We have a good letter. Really good letter.
We have a letter to us, which thank you so much for everyone sending in letters. It is truly our delight to give you questionable advice. So this letter is signed from M. So letter writer M. Hello, I love your podcast. Thank you, M.
Thank you.
I had to buy a separate bookshelf now since my to be read pile has expanded so dramatically. I have my own Am I the Asshole for you. My husband and I have been together for what feels like 800 years, but has really been about 13. I feel like we have a pretty good marriage. We have 2 young daughters, and we've gotten through some really difficult times together. Our main issue seems to be around how often we have sex. For me, I've always been really slow to rev. It takes a lot to get me going. Romance novels help. And things like parental worries, fears over the state of the world, hello last 3 years, and work stress make it a lot harder for me. My husband is more 0 to 60 and would like to have sex a lot more than I would. We've had multiple conversations about this, which does not necessarily put me in the mood. I've explained to him that I'm not a touchy-feely kind of person in general, not a hugger. We've tried scheduling intimate time, and I have tried speaking to a therapist to help manage my anxiety, and have tried other ways to reduce stress. But at the end of the day, he and I just seem to have different views on how important sex is in our relationship. Am I the asshole for wanting him to accept that I don't think I can change? M.
Wow, M. Well, thank you for your letter.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you trusting us with this. Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, that is a big one. It's like I immediately was like, I relate to that really hard, because I think women are, I feel like women are very, take on a lot of stress throughout the day and throughout life. Just, we shoulder it without question. It's just, we're always thinking about 4 to 5 huge things and about 700 smaller things, and it never really ends. And it's hard to flip it like a switch. It really is. I'm like, are we supposed to talk about ourselves?
If you feel comfortable sharing.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's your guys' take on it? I'd like to hear what you guys have to say.
I mean, sex and intimacy in a relationship, not everybody, I think more often than not, and we probably don't talk about this a lot, people are not always on the same level to begin with. Someone has like 0 to 60 and someone is, 0 to 60 in 2 and someone's 0 to 60 in 15 or whatever. But it's not something that I think people feel comfortable talking about. They just sort of like go along with things, or they just probably pretend that everything is cool when they're really struggling. So I think it's an important topic. But yeah, I think, we put a lot of emphasis on sex in relationships, and there are obviously relationships that have no sexual component at all. So you have, ones that are not based on, but really revolve around the intimacy, and some that don't. And intimacy can look like any number of things, so I think as long as people are communicating, which it sounds like they are, but they're still struggling to find a place where they can meet. So yeah, I don't have like a sweeping piece of advice, but talking about it, I think definitely helps. I think it does trouble me that M has spoken to a therapist and is not finding any help there. So I don't know if that's something that just needs more time, or find someone else who, could help. I don't know. What do you think, Ron?
Yeah, well, it seemed like Em was speaking to the therapist about specifically her anxiety in an attempt to reduce the anxiety to levels where it wasn't interfering with her arousal ability. And so if that was sort of the explicit goal, maybe there are just some things that you haven't talked about yet, you haven't hit on yet. But more importantly, like if you're experiencing anxiety that's making your life, having nothing to do with sex, just like making your life harder, then you should definitely be chatting with a therapist about your feelings, not trying to solve yourself as if you're a problem for your partner. Like I think it's super important to know that sex drive, or what we call sex drive, like it's super variable. It is on a spectrum just like every other like element of human experience, which means there are people who have 0 sex drive and people who have 100 sex drive and everything in between. And like all of those are literally normal. They're neutral. They're like anyone could have any of them. And I think it's very difficult when you're constantly bombarded with a super like a culture that treats sex as if it's one thing for everyone when it obviously isn't. And I think like, of course we all know that's a lie, but like you drink the water you're swimming in, right? And so we tend to think like whatever amount of sex would, if I were in a rom-com, get me labeled like fun, that's the amount that we're supposed to be having, which is of course absurd. And like it's inborn. There are tons of things you can do to like get more in the mood or be more communicative about your desire. But when it comes down to it, like there are some things that are biologically tendencies. And if your husband is interested in having sex more often than you, that's the same as like someone getting hungrier faster than you. Like it's to do with your body, it's to do with your mind, it's to do with your input and output. And like there's no reason that you should adjust yourself to his sex drive any more than he needs to adjust himself to your sex drive.
Yours, yeah.
And I mean, that's something that like you can talk about till the cows come home. And I think it's great to talk about, but I don't think it's a problem you have to solve. Like wanting different amounts of sex isn't a problem. Having feelings that are negative about the amount that either of you are having sex and what you think it means about your relationship and what you worry your partner thinks you think it means, like that's where the problem is. And sex drive can mean so many different things, and wanting to have sex does not have to mean having sex with you. Like your partner should absolutely masturbate, have fantasies, like do all these things, have an independent like sex life, because then he can get his needs met of having sex as often as he wants, really. And it's a different kind of sex, so it's not the same thing, but like it's not like you're a vending machine where like a certain amount of time goes by and your husband is like, ooh, I want to stick my dick in something, get on it, like not that I'm saying that's what he thinks, but like it's a very transactional and a very like one-to-one based idea. And I just don't think that that's really how relationships work on any axis.
I wonder, did she mention if they had gone to therapy together or if she had just gone by herself?
No.
She didn't mention it. She just said she'd gone by herself, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, like, I think I really agree with everything that Roan said. Like, it's not, you're not, like I said, like a switch to be flipped. Like you are not there to just turn on when your partner wants to have sex, and your feelings matter. And, if the fact that you don't want to as often as he does, that's important and that matters and it's valid. I think if you really, if you want to try and find a way to get sort of closer to common ground, I mean, I think maybe couples therapy is a really good idea. There's obviously something that's, I mean, there's something standing in the way of you feeling relaxed enough to get into the mood. And maybe he's not helping with that, like maybe there's something he's doing. Like, I don't know. For me, it's like very hard to switch out of like mother mode, and she has 2 children. I don't feel sexy when I'm in mother mode. I don't feel sexy when I just like cleaned the basement. I feel like, I don't know if there's like some sort of routine that I've gotten into with my husband that like gives me time to decompress and find like, like where I feel comfortable and where I can be just a woman for a while and I don't have to think about everything else that's stressing me out. But I think like a couples therapist could really help, could possibly help develop some techniques for that.
Yeah. I do wonder also whether or not the anxiety is a generalized anxiety or if it's something that's tied to their sex life, because she doesn't, or M doesn't, differentiate between I have anxiety and it's affecting our sex life, or I have anxiety about our sex life, because those are two totally different things. And then I remember a while back when we had a letter, I don't know if it was to us or something we found, where this issue was kind of, the levels were not matching with the couple, and you gave some great advice about how to find intimacy with each other without sex, just like you talked about masturbation, mutual masturbation, or like being with someone while they masturbate, just sort of like finding other ways to get intimacy without that pressure of whatever they consider sex. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I thought that's another one, I think another piece of advice
She did
that
say she
you can
was
bring
that
back.
touchy-feely type as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she said that romance novels help. I wonder, if romance novels help get you in the mood. It sounds like maybe you have responsive desire more than like desire just to bang from 0 to 60, right?
Yeah,
And responsive desire is like you read something sexy and you start to feel aroused, or like you felt no aroused, you were just being there normal, and like someone comes, and this wouldn't be for you because you're not a toucher, but like gently runs their fingers through your hair or along your neck. Like these are non-sexual but sensual things. And I wonder if you really get aroused by reading romance novels, if maybe you and your husband or partner could read them together. Like maybe you could read them to him or he could read them to you, especially the sex scenes that you found really arousing. And that would like give you enough time and put you in a place where it's all about sensuality, and maybe you could sort of use that time to get a little turned on while also choosing a sex scene that you're like, wouldn't hate if we acted this out in the bedroom. Read about it, let me get turned on, and then act it out. And that would sort of like give you a little time to warm up and have it feel more like you're directing the scene because you've chosen the sex scene to read. It's a give and a take. And I think that sometimes like we can get so into patterns, especially with people that we sleep with often, where it's like the same person always initiates it. And then the other person's like, well, guess it's time to have sex now. I know what I'm going to do. And I think those things, like there's nothing wrong with doing what works for you, but also something really routine isn't often very sensual or sexual. So yeah, just kind of like getting out of the routine that you usually do, maybe you initiating the process, but then allowing yourself to have responsive desire by what you're doing with it. Some of the things I suggested in the episode that Xio is mentioning is like one thing that my partner and I really like to do is mutual masturbation, which is like, it's like midnight, you're really tired, you're a little horny. Wouldn't it be awesome to have an orgasm? But like, if you couldn't possibly do more than like 4 minutes of work, and definitely you need to do it like exactly the way you want it. So then you can like lie next to each other and hold each other and masturbate together. Everyone's getting exactly what they need in the fastest and least effortful way possible. You come, you kiss, you love each other, good night, you fall asleep, right? And it's like, it doesn't take the place of sex. It is like oh, I would love to push a vending machine button and get an orgasm now, please. And like, I don't want any of the sitting down and ordering off the menu, I just want like room. So that I love because I am lazy. And I also recommended like, if your partner wants to have sex more than you and kind of doesn't like masturbating on their own as much as you participating, then you can totally participate in a sexual encounter with your husband without you being the one who's like having sex with your body. So like whatever turns him on, like a toy or his hands or whatever it is, like you can be there, you could be sitting right next to him, you could be touching him. If you're not touchy feely but he is, you could kind of ramp him up and tease him during the day with those subtle touches, which like you're not the one being touched but maybe he is. And then like, again, you're participating, you're initiating sensual contact, but there isn't like I'm afraid that if I kiss him or touch him, he will take that as, we're gonna like bang this instant, which I think sometimes if you're the person who has a lower sex drive or wants to have sex less often, eventually your intimacy starts to erode even outside the bedroom, because there is this sense that like you don't want to promise something with a touch that you're not ready to deliver on with sex right away. And I think that creates a ton of stress, a ton of like expectation, which is not sexy or relaxing. So yeah, I think imagining yourself as the subject and the doer rather than the object, I think might help a lot. And putting the things that really turn you on, like making those the things you start with always, then you can gauge your own desire. If you have responsive desire, like when you start reading the romance novel, you're probably not going to be like, I would love to have sex right now. But then if after you read the scene, you're like, I do want to have sex now, then great. If after you read the scene, you're like, I don't want to have sex now, but I would love to, husband, watch you, use this toy on you, any of these things, like then it just puts you in control. And for me, a certain amount of control feels a lot better than sort of feeling at the mercy of someone else's whims, especially if they don't line up with your own.
Yeah, that may be why they tried scheduling time, which I don't know that that ever worked for anyone. Maybe it does, I don't know. But every instance I've heard of someone trying to schedule intimacy just has not worked. Just, you know, because that's a lot of pressure. Okay, it's 9:03 p.m. We are going to bang now. You know, like it just seems, I don't know.
Yeah.
Going back to what Roan said about the about reading a romance novel, I recently read that like 2/3 of women find their partner more attractive when they engage in something that interests their like them. You know, like so if you love romance novels, like he should absolutely try and read one, or at least read a scene or two with you and talk about, try and pinpoint what it is about that scene that's turning you on. You know, like, what is it? Is it just the conversation? You know, because that's okay. Like, if it's the banter and just like the sort of, you know, will they or won't they, or the sexual tension, like, there's something to be said there. And you should try and explain that to him, maybe communicate that. What is it about that that's turning you on? And then eventually maybe the next step would be, how do we sort of bring this into our real life?
Yeah, definitely. And you can use romance novels to suggest any number of things to your partner. And I think some people do. Like a reader was telling me once that she like highlights passages from sex scenes in romance novels she likes, and then compiles the things she's highlighted and sends them to her husband as like a just FYI. And basically, like what that is a sort of less pressure filled conversation about like, this is what I want to try. This is what I like. This is what turns me on. This is what I would love it if you did. And those are conversations that I feel like everyone who has sex should be having with whoever they're having sex with. But it's sometimes not that easy to like express what turns you on, or even to know what turns you on. And so this, like Tessa was saying, this gives you like a concrete thing that you can point to and be like, this hot. Ever want to try it? Please do. Or like a script of dirty talk that you would love him to say to you, or whatever. I just think that there's the real problem with this is bad feeling. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong.
No, not at all.
Sex drive, and there's nothing wrong with your husband's sex drive. And like there are so many ways to sort of like clunk, clunk, clunk until you meet in the middle. And it might take a little creativity. It might take experimenting with some things that don't work until you find the thing that really does it for you. But
yeah,
seems super worth it to me.
Absolutely.
And, you know, stick with the therapy, because we're, you know, the last 3 years have been difficult, I think, for everyone, almost without exception, and everyone's dealing with it in their own way. And if it's really stressing you out, then, you know, definitely keep talking, see if you can work through some of those issues. Hopefully we've given you something that you can work with today.
Yes, please write back and let us know what you decide to do, or like what, I mean, I desperately would like to know which romance scenes you
Right.
agree with your husband, but maybe you don't want to tell me, but I want to know. Just like, if you want to share, I want to know.
Well, this brings me to our chat topic today, because sex and intimacy are such tricky issues in relationships, and we all write on this page sex in our books, though you guys both write, I think, more spice than I do, generally speaking. Have you ever dealt with anything like what Em is talking about here, either, I guess in your books, we won't talk about personal life, but in your books, or do you have any characters who are asexual or demisexual or have intimacy issues?
No, I haven't gone down that road yet. But that isn't that is something I would like to explore. Like, I mean, I think that I have, we all know I have like a lot of inexperienced characters, whether it's like, the hero or the heroine, that sort of like don't know if they like sex yet, um, or they've only liked sex with their partner. I've had that, just like not really attracted to anybody until they meet their partner. So I guess that is something along those lines. But
Mhm.
yeah, no, I haven't really dealt with anybody who sort of has, um, you know, doesn't have like a much of a sex drive as their partner. I wouldn't say
Mhm.
so. No,
Mhm.
I will.
Yeah, I have several demisexual. I have several characters on the asexuality spectrum. I yeah, one of my favorite books that I wrote is Invitation to the Blues, which is the main character is a musician who suffers from extreme depression and anxiety. So he's on antidepressants and they completely kill his ability to get an erection. And he still enjoys sex and he still enjoys being touched and intimacy. But it's just like, it's just a side effect. It's biological. There's not really much he can do about it. But he can still like experience arousal. And when he gets with Farron, who's his love interest in the book, he's really embarrassed to have to tell Farron that initially. And so there's some discussion about it. And of course, because it's Farron, he's great about it. But yeah, they actually have a sex scene that is like their first sex scene that is all about having no expectations and no end. And the way that we sort of think of sex as like a teleological thing where it has a known shared beginning, middle, and end, but that actually like that's a pretty narrow way to think about the sex act, like sex act. So they talk about that and try to figure out ways that they can sort of like build up to him experiencing sex the way he wants to. And it's sort of like it continues through the book, like he's not cured, making huge air quotes. And his ability to experience different kinds of pleasure like ebb and flow throughout the book. But yeah, but I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed writing that book because I am also on antidepressants and I definitely have experienced my sex drive being affected, not killed. I've been very lucky, but like it definitely for me is something where I'm aware that like something that would have turned me on before I started medication doesn't now, just because it's like I have a higher threshold. But also I'm a person now, so great trade-off in my opinion, but totally real side effects.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, one of the characters I'm writing now is Demi, and he does well. I've had another Demi character who sort of struggled with it and didn't really know, was like, why am I so different? And this guy, Ollie, just knows, and he's totally cool with it, and doesn't really struggle with the not finding other people attractive until he has that connection. And no one questions him about it. It's the first time I've written one where a character where they're not like constantly explaining themselves to people, So yeah, I do write on that spectrum as well, quite more than I thought I did. But yeah.
And it's such a good question because I think that like most people who read romance with sex on the page have opinions about the sex that they want to read about, and those don't necessarily align with their own particular like real life sexual desires or experiences. But I think for very many of us, reading about things makes us want to try them, and just like the amount of stuff that you can learn about yourself if you're open to trying different things is huge. And I love that we get to participate in like basically writing a bunch of sex stuff that people might not have known that they wanted or needed, and then they read romance novels and they're like, oh, I want and need, or oh my gosh, I've just realized I neither want nor need. Amazing. But like any kind of self-clarification always feels like such a payoff to me. And I think that sex in romance novels, if it's done well and thought through, like really bears that out.
Yeah, agreed. Wow. Well, thank you, Em,
Always.
for opening up this conversation. It was a really important one, I think, and hopefully you will get back to us and let us know how things are going with you guys. You know, we want you guys to find your bliss.
Definitely. Yes, please write back to us.
Yeah.
And Tessa, thank you so much for being here. It has been a pleasure. Do you want to
Yeah.
tell all the listeners again where they can find you on the internet, what book of yours they should be buying right now?
All of that.
Sure. You know, I'm in all the normal places like Instagram, I'm at Tessa Bailey as an author. On TikTok, I'm at author Tessa Bailey, and you can find me on my website, tessabailey.com. My most recent book is My Killer Vacation, which is a sort of like a romp, romantic comedy romp with a side of murder. But it's a bounty hunter and a second grade teacher solving a murder together.
Nice.
In Cape Cod. So yeah, it's unrealistic and it's a lot of fun.
If you guys are not following Tessa on TikTok, you are missing out because she's one of my favorite TikTokers. She's hilarious.
Thanks.
So much fun.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again for hanging out with us, and thank you guys for tuning in for another episode of Dear Romance Writer. Remember, send in your questions. You can email us at advice@dearromancewriter.com, slide into our DMs, carrier pigeons, and what are those things where they used to send like people to your door dressed as like
Singing telegram.
Singing
singing
telegrams.
telegram.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, send us. That would be awesome to get a singing telegram. Then you would know where we lived, and that would be kind of creepy. But anyway, find us online. Send us your questions. We can't wait to get you some questionable advice. Avery will be back next week, and you'll hear from your trio of happily ever after enthusiasts. See you next time.
Thank you so much for subscribing to Dear Romance Writer. Remember to keep sending in those letters at dearromancewriter.com. We can't wait to tell you what to do. Dear Romance Writer is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love, frolic.media/podcast.